Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. Our mission is to see a world well led. And our strategy to get there? To empower leaders like you to lead every day. So let's get to work.
Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. I'm Randy Gravitt.
And I'm Mark Miller.
And Mark, I almost didn't make it today to the shoot. We're here, we're filming. I'm excited. If you've not checked us out on YouTube, I hope you'll do that. A lot of you probably listening on Spotify or Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for downloading and being a part of our Lead Every Day family. But I almost didn't make it, Mark. There was traffic, like it was crazy coming in today.
That happens.
And it does happen. But what I found out is there was one car that kind of got over on the side of the road, and next thing you know, there's a couple of police cars that were lined up, and then it shuts down the whole freeway, and it's just a mess. There were these barricades basically they had set up, and we had to go around, and it was not good. And it made me start thinking about this conversation we've been having about community. So many of us are struggling to have genuine community on our teams because we don't recognize there are some barriers and some challenges that are going to slow us down if we don't know they're there. So I want to talk about those a little bit today. If you're the leader out there who's listening, we said earlier, you may go, this is too squishy. That to me is the number one barrier. I mean, it is. It starts
perception.
There.
The perception. I have been part of teams that have been actively pursuing community. I mentioned this on a previous episode. Even before we had language for it, I started pursuing community almost 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And there have been naysayers every step of the way. I mean, there are people with good hearts and good minds that just, for whatever reason, can't connect the dots. And so I think that's part of the leader's challenge.
They would say this is not real work.
They'd say this is not real work.
Yeah.
This is like you're wasting time. This is poor stewardship. This is wasteful. This is ridiculous. This is stupid. There's all kind of stuff I've heard over 40 years. It's like, well, that's great. I appreciate your perspective. I feel it's incumbent on the leader to help explain the strategy, to cast the vision, to provide the needed ongoing leadership so that it's not a flavor of the month. It's not something that when it gets hard in a month or two or three that you're going to abandon ship and that person's going to say, well, I told you so, right? You've got to believe it, and then you've got to challenge those misconceptions.
Well, and you use the word strategy. It is a part of the strategy. And what happens when you have somebody who's not on board with the strategy? I mean, like you got a group of people around your team table, and you say, this is a strategy we're going to go after. There's got to be alignment there, or there's not really community. I mean, I know you got a story about this through the years.
The short answer is when you're dealing with people, I believe you should always err on the side of grace because this is a new idea. I mean, I've literally had teams on day one, everybody thought this was a crazy idea.
Yeah.
And I'd say, well, humor me because this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
I can imagine it'd be much like a coach who introduces a new offensive scheme and the team goes, that's not the way we do it. That's not the way we've done it in the past.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, but the coach is called a new play. The coach is setting up a new paradigm here for us.
Yeah.
And so I want to err on the side of grace and I want to try to help win people over. But at some point, the leader has to make a tough call. I literally had a guy after months and months and months just kind of went public with the whole team with his feelings. He said, I don't want to be part of this community. Now, I don't believe I'd have said that, but he did. And guess what? He didn't get to stay on the team because that was part of our strategy for high performance. We wanted to become a high performance team, and that's talent, skills, and community focused on results. It'd be, back to a sports example, it'd be like a player saying, I know the play the coach called, but I don't want to run that play. You don't actually get to decide.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to get there, but you can only invite people into community. But you have to deal with the misconceptions and the perceptions.
Okay, so if the misconception is, or the squishiness of it, or perception is maybe the first barrier that we check off. Are there some other barriers, other challenges that you've seen that might get in the way of somebody who's saying, I really want to do this, but I need to, let's call some out here.
Sure. Another barrier is time. It takes time to build community. I was actually part of a work group, and we've not really delved into this, and I don't want to geek out on the technicalities here, but a work group is when you take, let's just say you take 3 people, and they each do their individual work, and you add it up and you call that the team's output. It's 1 + 1 + 1 is 3. There's no synergy. There's no lift that you would get from collaboration and working as a team. That's actually not a team. It's a work group. It's people doing individual work, and you just add it up at the end.
They have a meeting.
Yeah, they might have a meeting or might not.
Probably a bad meeting.
But you add up their work at the end of the week or the month or the quarter or the year and say, here's our collective output
Doesn't matter
as
if they're
a
together
team.
or not, still the same.
It's work groups aren't fundamentally evil. They just leave a lot of performance potential on the table, right? There's untapped potential. Every work group could do more if they work together.
Yeah.
But you can't become a high-performance team without investing the time.
Yeah.
And I was part of a work group where the leader asked me to talk to the group about the differences between being a work group and being a high-performance team. And I said, the fundamental difference, assuming that you have some skills that are already in place, is you've got to invest time to build community. And the leader and the people around the table said, we don't want to invest any more time. And the leader said, okay, then we'll just keep being a work group. That literally happened to me.
Wow.
It's like, okay. But time is a huge barrier, and sometimes the demands on time will actually win, which means you've chosen lower levels of performance.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy, but it happens.
And we'll get into this more, but I think that's one of the things at stake. These higher levels of performance are at stake when we spend time thinking about, not just thinking about, but we do the things we need. We put the time on our schedule to pursue community like we've been talking about. This is a barrier. If we're not careful, we can even get successful. We can get complacent. There's all kind of these underlying emotions that are psychological factors that become. We're not psychologists here, but we see it happen all the time. If we get complacent about this idea, well, we've been together a long time. We know each other pretty good. You know, my wife and I've been married 37 years almost, and if we're not working on that all the time, you don't just live in the same house and call it community. I mean, right. I've been telling people. I even talk about it. You know, as we talk about winning at home, but proximity is not the same thing as intimacy. There's a difference. And I think on a team, you take the term correctly, but you want intimacy in your team. You want them to really know each other. Just because you've been going to the same meeting every Thursday for 12 years doesn't mean that you know each other, you serve each other, you love each other like we talked about. This can be a barrier if we're not careful.
Yeah. A related barrier is that in many organizations, you put 6 or 8 people in a room and you say, poof, you're a team.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no more than they're a frog. I mean, no, they're not. They're not a team. At best, they're a work group. They might be a pseudo team, which is when they're spending time and energy pretending to be a team that is actually reducing performance.
Right, because I had all my time to spend on my job, and now I'm coming together to these meetings you got me coming to, and now we're getting I don't have enough for me to go around kind of thing. And that is one of the barriers. I mean, there's like to be a little breakthrough here. At some point, we do get to 1 + 1 + 1 goes to 4, and then it just continues to grow if we really understand as we work together better, we understand each other more, we help each other. I mean, it's all that. We solve problems together that are causing us individually to struggle. I mean, a lot of good stuff there.
So let me give you the last barrier that I would mention, and you won't be surprised by this. The biggest barrier to community is leadership.
Yeah.
You gotta have a leader. It was back a couple episodes ago. You're like, how do you create it? Well, the first thing is you have to decide. Who decides? The leader decides.
This is
and then the last thing we talked about in that episode is you've got to lead. You've got to stay the course, and you've got to say, no. This is not optional. This is not extracurricular. And without a leader willing to build community over time, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so let's land it here. The flow of traffic in your organization with your team, it may be slower than you think it should be right now. Here's what I want to challenge you to do. Get yourself a meeting on the schedule, get everybody around the table, and have everybody pass out index cards and have everybody write down the 3 biggest barriers to your team being the best that it could possibly be, and then read those out around the table and see if there's some language that comes out. You say, you know what, we could change that. We could go after that. We could make this better. I think you've got a huge opportunity here to remove the barriers, the obstacles that are keeping you from having genuine community, which again is the difference in a good team and a really great team. You can do this, but you got to decide to do it if you're going to do it. Remember, the best leaders lead every day.